Mo Farah was in exactly that position. We all cheered him at the Olympics because he is part of Team GB. But his story is the story that right now we're saying we wouldn't want to support, not because of the contribution that person made, but because of the route they took to get away from harm. I just don't think that's where the British public are. But we need to be clear about what's actually been proposed, because this is guidance about making a citizenship application, so for naturalisation. And what it says is that if you took an irregular route, so I really want us to get away from the language of illegal in the sense of it's not illegal to claim asylum. Absolutely, at the point at which somebody claims asylum, there are various rules about it, and we've got to be really clear about them and why they matter. But this is for people who've already been accepted into the country, who have a reasonable claim for being a refugee and therefore are being allowed to stay indefinitely. And what they've done is issue guidance to those people who then might make a judgment about any application they make for citizenship, saying it doesn't matter what you've done, who you are, or where you've come from. The matter is how you got here. And I think that is counterproductive to safe borders, because this is not actually about immigration, it's about integration. It's about what happens once you are here and when we've said you can stay. But I also think, look, frankly, I just don't think it's where the British public are at, which is if we are going to allow you to stay, we would want you to take the route to be able to be part of our communities and to play your part and to have that responsibility that comes with citizenship as well. So when I saw this, I genuinely felt this was actually counterproductive to all the other very good work I think is going on to get to grips with the asylum system and get to deal with the backlog of people who are sitting waiting for that initial decision in the first place, to be very clear that the problem here are the people exploiting people and go after the gangs who are putting people on boats. But also to say, look, international law matters and how we treat people matters, and we will do our fair share of supporting those people who are fleeing persecution and fleeing conflict.
Because you voted for this legislation on Monday. So what was it that you were voting for, and what has changed since then?
So we need to be very clear, this was not in the bill on Monday. This is guidance that has been issued to those people who will then be receiving citizenship applications from people who already have the right to stay in the UK indefinitely. You can't apply for citizenship if you don't already have the right to stay in the UK. This is about naturalising that relation. It's essentially it's a very emotional process. I deal with a lot of people in this situation for whom they're never going to be able to go back to their home country. They've made a life here and now they would like to be part of our communities. I just don't think the British public are in the position where they want to say somebody who might have been here for many, many years, who has family here, no, sorry, you can't be an equal citizen, even though you can stay forever, you just can't be an equal.
And will this guidance mean, will you have some constituents who you will have to inform or who may come to meet you? Will you have to tell them that they may not be able to apply for citizenship now?
Well, the Refugee Council have estimated there's already 70,000 people in this position because the guidance came in and was effective from Monday. So there was no consultation, no forewarning about it. It came in at the same time as the legislation, but it's not part of the legislation. So there hasn't been a vote in Parliament to agree this way forward. So inevitably, there will be thousands of people across the country who have the right to stay, but now don't have a path to citizenship if they want to take that path. Of course, people are going to turn up in our constituency surgeries asking what they do and why we're saying you can stay, but we don't want you to be an equal.
And this is coming in tandem with Labour's new push to show asylum seekers arrest, well, what they call illegal workers. They've put out a lot of footage now of nail bars being raided, car washes being raided, and people being arrested because they are deemed quote unquote illegal. And I wonder if you think that perhaps there needs to be a mechanism for granting people who have come here as asylum seekers. Should there be a mechanism to give those people a national insurance number quicker or help them get onto the legal framework of working quicker?
Well, there's a lot to unpack there, Ava, right? Let's be clear. The footage is of foreign nationals being deported who have committed crimes. And that is right, as far as I'm concerned. If you've committed a crime, you have, and there are rules, clear rules, where you can revoke somebody's refugee status if they do that. And that is an important part of the Refugee Convention. Secondly, there are people who are being exploited in this country. We know that modern slavery and trafficking is an issue. So I want to see intelligence-led immigration raids. The previous government used to do what was essentially fishing expeditions that were deeply divisive. It happened in my local community in Walthamstow, where they would come along. They didn't have any particular reason to come to Walthamstow. They were targeting a diverse community. That should not be happening in modern Britain. But where we have intelligence that criminal gangs are exploiting vulnerable people, absolutely, we want to intervene because that is modern slavery and modern trafficking. There then comes a question about what happens to those people who are victims of trafficking and how we support those people. And then there is a third question there, I think, in what you're saying, which is, frankly, how long it takes to process people who've come here to claim asylum, who then get asylum, but can be left for years waiting for a decision, and whether we should be saying, actually, we're going to set ourselves a target about how quickly we can process people, and then we're going to allow people to work if it takes longer than that, because they cannot support themselves, so then they're dependent on the state. And I meet people who have skills that we need, people with medical qualifications, for example, who are not allowed to work. But I think, again, the British public would say, well, actually, if you've got those skills and it's taking us too long to process you, then we should be doing something about that. And we need to be clear about how big that backlog of people was, because the previous government was throwing money, good money after bad, on its ideas about Rwanda that is now being spent on dealing with the backlog. I want secure borders. I don't want people left in limbo. I also want to tell the other story about, actually, if people have skills, if people are fleeing persecution, there is an honourable role for us to play our part alongside other countries in helping those people. And when we do help them and we say we recognise you're fleeing persecution, then we need to treat them as decent people and say, and there is a route for you to become part of our society as part of integration. And that's what citizenship is.
Because there's a very good argument for these people while they are waiting for their asylum claim to be approved. And I know of a couple of people who did cross the channel, and I have seen their cases, and I do know that they're waiting on a decision. But judging by what I've seen of their cases, these will be approved, as are most asylum claims. But they are currently languishing in hotels and they are unable to work. And what they read day in, day out is that they are a drain on the system. They are lambasted for taking up taxpayer money, living in these hotels, and they don't want to be there. And I wonder, is there any push from campaigners to break that cycle, to break that, people being stuck in limbo for so long?
Well, look, I think Yvette Cooper is right when she says we've got to get to grips with the backlog, because that is what's creating that situation where you've got people who can't work because they don't have status. And I think it is right that we set ourselves some very tough targets to get through that, because the British public don't like being taken for fools, that people can be left for years in that limbo. And I think it's right to say, look, we've got to sort that out. The question for all of us is, what is the reasonable amount of time it should take to process an application? When I was first elected in 2010, it was Jack Straw, the former Home Secretary, who said to me that there are two divides in Parliament. There's left and right, and there's people who have to deal with the UKBA on a daily basis and people who don't. I fall into that category of an MP who deals with hundreds of people every single year who are dealing with a bureaucracy and an administration that just doesn't work. What I can tell you honestly, Ava, is over the last 14 years, it got worse, not better, under the previous government. Genuinely, in the last 6 or 7 months, we've seen a much more improved, a much clearer process of decision making, which is better all round, including if the decision is actually you don't have a well-founded fear of persecution, or you can't have a visa, and so you need to leave the country. It's the worst of all worlds and the most expensive thing when the system breaks down. It's right to get to grips with that. It was wrong to spend all that money, never sending a single person to Rwanda in the end of it anyway, that could be spent on that. But actually, we have to talk about what happens when people do come here, and why, as you say, like 2/3 of the people on the boats have their asylum claims approved because there aren't safe routes for those people to come. So I've dealt with people who are Afghan interpreters who were on those boats, people who put their lives at risk to support our armed forces. But because the previous government didn't get its act together on the what was called the ARAC scheme, they were left with little choice if they were going to be somewhere safe. Many of the people on those boats are from Iran. I've listened to Conservative MPs get up and speak about Iranian dissidents and the importance of standing up to the Iranian regime, but frankly not join the dots about how do you, if you are one of those people, those brave people standing up to the Iranian regime, flee from persecution, because there isn't a safe route from Iran. We need more balance in this debate about asylum and refugees, And that's separate to a debate about immigration and the benefits of immigration to our economy and our society, but also how you then manage all of these things, because frankly, it hasn't worked for decades.
Finally, I just want to ask you about that bill that's now making its way through, well, the various different mechanisms in Parliament. There was not a stipulation in there about safe routes, and I understand that this government is trying to crack down on smuggling gangs. They're trying to crack down on criminal activity, but there isn't an alternative. So if people aren't making that dangerous crossing of the Channel and entering the UK, quote unquote, illegally, how would they apply to get here? I mean, you just mentioned the Arab scheme. We've known that actually that scheme has been full for years. You know, that maxed out pretty much almost the day after the fall of Kabul. So what are people meant to do if they are fleeing persecution? How would they get here if it's not crossing the Channel?
Well, we need to be clear what happened with Arab was not that there were thousands of people, it's that it wasn't properly effective. I mean, for some reason, they prioritised Chevening scholars, for example, over those people who were clearly identified by the Taliban because they'd acted as interpreters, but didn't happen to work for a think tank. That is not an effective functioning way of dealing with the situation in Afghanistan. Actually, what we need to do alongside, like, nobody should be under any illusions that there isn't an organised crime problem and that we do need to go after those gangs. It's right what this bill is doing about border control and bringing those forces together. You know, Priti Patel spent all that time sitting in a gunboat, but she didn't actually work with her French counterparts about how you could tackle those gangs. And those gangs are not just involved in people trafficking, there's all sorts of organised crime involved in that. But actually, one of the most effective things that we did was we had a returns agreement with Europe in terms of doing our part in terms of managing refugees and how they were processed. And processing is basically looking at people's claims. Now, the French and the German interior ministries have said they want to do that kind of deal with the United Kingdom. I think that would be the right thing to look at. How do we make sure we play our part? We're not overburdened. So nobody's saying that the UK should take every single refugee. What we are saying is this is a world crisis. 1 in 8 people in this world is fleeing persecution or climate change in terms of the disruption it's causing in their home countries. So we have to work together. And the way that you work together, the way that you have essentially safe routes is you have proper processing of people's claims, because what those traffickers are exploiting is not the United Kingdom, but the fact that people are fleeing those situations and that there isn't an effective way to manage their claim for asylum. If we had that, alongside being clear that we wouldn't have a backlog, so we make a decision, and if the decision is that you can't stay, you need to leave and you will be helped to leave, we're clear that if you break the rules, if you commit crimes, that's not acceptable either. But we're also clear that if you come here and this becomes your home, there is a route to citizenship, there is a route to integration. I think that's where the British public are at. They don't want to see people exploiting a system, but they do want to see people being treated with dignity. After all, that's why people were so horrified by the Windrush scandal, because it wasn't treating people who were part of our communities with dignity. And the risk with this right now is we could be falling into the same trap where we leave people who aren't going to leave the country. They've got nowhere to go. They're stateless. But without that route to integration and without that equality, that I think the British public are proud that we've been able to do. You know, we've been joking a lot today about Paddington, a fictional character. Well, let's talk about some real people. Sir Mo Farah was in exactly that position. We all cheered him at the Olympics because he is part of Team GB. But his story is the story that right now we're saying we wouldn't want to support, not because of the contribution that person made, but because of the route they took to get away from harm. I just don't think that's where the British public are.